So I recently received a question related to threshold work and implementing freestyle versus other strokes within threshold work and how I tend to see that process and what I would recommend. So it will depend on the goals of the session as well as the strokes that are being used. So if the goal is a freestyle focused threshold session, from my perspective, most of that work or almost all of that work should take place in freestyle. You don't want to tend to mix the strokes up too much because it kind of changes where the stress goes, and you want the stress to be in the same muscles, in the same places, in the same rhythms, and all that with freestyle. And so if it's a freestyle focused set, and that's the goal is to improve threshold freestyle, I would stay focused on freestyle throughout almost the entirety of it. If you want to make that a little bit more upper body or lower body driven, you can definitely mix in kicking or pulling or something that's a little bit more upper body stroke count focused. That certainly works well because you're still working on the same stroke. When it comes to backstroke, my belief is that threshold backstroke, especially for 200-meter backstroke swimmers, can be really, really valuable, especially when it's done well. And so there's a couple different approaches you can take to that. Depending on the volume of the set, you can certainly do it the entire set backstroke. And if you're doing multiple threshold sessions over the course of a week, one of them could be backstroke, one of them could be freestyle, for instance. I think it's also valuable to do threshold sets that are both backstroke and freestyle. However, when one does that, I would split it up in half or whatever percentage you want to use, and then do all of the backstroke and then all of the freestyle, or do all the freestyle and then all of the backstroke. I would get away from mixing things up in terms of alternating between freestyle and backstroke. You get more of a benefit by concentrating that stress all at the same time with all the same stroke, either freestyle or backstroke. When it comes to butterfly, the answer is going to be a little bit different. So I think there's definitely value in mixing butterfly in with the freestyle to get a little bit more benefit. However, when you do that, instead of doing a big chunk of butterfly, because a lot of athletes can't handle that type of training and swim well with butterfly, is to alternate between freestyle and butterfly within the entire set. So you're constantly going back and forth between freestyle and butterfly. And what the key skill in designing the set is to do enough butterfly to challenge them, but not enough butterfly to overwhelm their ability to swim well with fly. And so you might have to play with the intensities of the butterfly, the intensity of the freestyle, so that you get them in the right area and you keep them in the right area for what you're looking for, rather than doing too much so that they either are working too hard or their strokes are falling apart. And so that's kind of the skill of it, is knowing the athletes and knowing how much to push them, but also how much not to push them, and to give them a little bit of recovery within the set so that they can still be successful. And the cool thing is there are almost infinite ways to do that. It's more about, and that's definitely where the skill of knowing your athletes and also designing effective sets is really powerful. And when breaststroke is the focus, it needs another approach as well. And so I would say that if you're going to do some freestyle, is just have an entire threshold set that's freestyle oriented, and maybe keep that separate from the breaststroke. And when you want to do that type of work with breaststroke, rather than swimming breaststroke, I would have them split it up into kicking and pulling. And so you're doing threshold type work with kicking and threshold type work with pulling. And that way you get to isolate those skills a little bit. You can focus on them a little bit more. And then also you're not going to really wreck the rhythm of the stroke with fatiguing long breaststroke swimming. There are some athletes that can handle that, but the majority cannot. And so I think you're much better off with more moderate intensity stuff with breaststroke. It's really splitting it up into the legs and splitting it up into the arms. And then you can get some really great skill work while still developing the physical capacities. When it comes to actually swimming breaststroke, you probably want to do more of that work at higher intensities. And with breaststroke, I would keep the freestyle stuff a little bit separate, because I think the rhythm and the way that those sets work is pretty different. And so the freestyle stuff is pretty dissimilar to the breaststroke stuff. And so I would just have them as two separate sets over the course of a week rather than mixing those up. And of course, through all this, you can really focus on specific skills within those sets, regardless of what stroke it is. And you can just have to be creative and find ways to integrate that with various stroke counts, stroke rate requirements. You can use different speed requirements. You can use different training aids, and you can use different tasks, different drills mixed in with that to really get the effects that you want. And I don't think you have to sacrifice any of the physical benefits by doing so. And in fact, you actually get more out of it because you can get the skill work and the fitness work. You just have to be intentional about how you do it. So I hope that's helpful in terms of how to approach threshold from a stroke perspective. And if you have follow-up questions or anything else you need, definitely let me know.